parties. We're going to get some tramp stamps. We're going to get some bad tribal tattoos. I mean, woo! Welcome to Hey, did you ever see that movie? I'm your host, Des, and as always, I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Lynn.
Halloween ain't till mañana.
And back by popular demand, the podcaster with a degree in terror, Tony.
Hey, how's it going?
So today we will be reviewing The Crow, a 1984 action fantasy movie directed by Alex Proyas, written by James O'Barr, David Show, and John Shirley, starring the late, great Brandon Lee as The Crow. As always, this podcast will be full of spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie, watch it first, then come back and listen to the podcast. But before we get started, let's run the trailer.
People once believed that when someone dies, a crow carries their soul to the land of the dead. But sometimes, just sometimes, the crow can bring that soul back to put the wrong things right.
You're all going to die. Is that gasoline I smell? Victims, aren't we all?
So, Delyn, do you want to give us a synopsis before we break into it?
Absolutely.
All right, shoot.
The night before his wedding, musician Eric Draven and his fiancée are brutally murdered by members of a violent inner-city gang. On the anniversary of their death, Eric rises from the grave and assumes the gothic mantle of the Crow, a supernatural avenger. Tracking down the thugs responsible for the crimes and mercilessly murdering them, Eric eventually confronts the head gangster Top Dollar to complete his macabre mission.
Hey, so before we get started, let's just, I got a couple of things I want to say about it that I think are kind of interesting. And then we'll discuss the first time we each saw this movie. I know you guys have a kind of a fun story on that. So first of all, I just wanted to say Miramax had originally been pressing to have Michael Jackson do this as a musical. They wanted him as the Crow. And of course, the director said, no way. What do you guys think Michael Jackson would have brought to this?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Okay, I think we're all in agreement there. And the other fun fact was there actually are no crows in this movie. No crows in this movie at all. They're all ravens, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting. I didn't know that.
And his name is Eric the Raven, maybe? Eric the Raven? I don't know. All right, so I think I've stepped on this enough. Go ahead, Dylan.
Okay, so I'm just going to put this out there right away. This movie came out at a point in my life when I identified with it very heavily. I'm very sentimental about it, and I'm going to try to view the movie a little bit more critically for the sake of the review. But yeah, it's a favorite. So I'm just going to put that out there as a disclaimer.
I got to be right there with Dylan. Came out in 94. I've been a fan of the comics since easily 92, religiously. Once they announced it was a movie, followed everything I could find, gobbled it all up. Devastated me when the accident happened. But just thinking it was never going to see the light of day, because if a movie was supposed to see the light of day, this was just it. I was religious with this movie. And, got to meet the James O'Barr, met him, and had an amazing hour-long conversation about the influences and the artistic choices, and then obviously huge influence on me in the early 90s. Not that I was an emo goth kid, but man, he made it cool to be. So, I'm sure we'll touch more on it later, but yeah, it's going to be. I honestly didn't watch the movie before we did this. I feel like I know it so much to not sound completely over the top dramatic, but it has that much of an effect on me that it really brings me back to a certain time in my life that I was a very different person. A lot of different people were in my life, and it's a cornerstone movie in my cinematic history, we'll say.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, Tony and I saw this in a early screening, and James O'Barr was there because I think that was the same day that you met him at the comic book store, wasn't it?
Yep, comic book, yeah.
Yeah. So that's how far back we go. So
Okay. And the first time I saw this was yesterday on my couch. I literally can't believe that I never saw this before. When I put it on, I said, I've never seen this. I've never even seen one scene from this movie, and it blew my mind that I hadn't.
So much has been influenced by it. At least seen so much since then.
Yeah, I mean, I and being a guy that was kind of into all that stuff, it was just really blew my mind that I hadn't seen it. So I watched it through once, and I'm not gonna lie, I was afraid to do this podcast with you guys because I didn't like it. I'm gonna be honest with you, but I felt like I had to be missing something. So I went back and I watched it again today. Tried to just watch it again with a fresh point of view and just really try to understand it. And I saw it completely differently, which is something that doesn't often happen when I watch the same movie 2 days in a row. We'll get into why I changed my opinion on it on the second watch. So that was my experience with it.
I'm intrigued.
yes. And I also reread the comic, which I literally have not done since probably I saw the movie the first time. And I forgot how different the movie and the comic kind of are. And some of the changes were for the better. Some of the changes I felt like maybe weren't so great, but it was nice to have that in the back of my head as I was rewatching the movie and refreshing my memory of it. So that was also interesting. And I've got a couple of points here and there that I can point out that I thought were a little different. So our movie opens with a voiceover. A little girl is telling us that in some cultures, when someone dies, a crow carries their soul to the afterlife. But sometimes when there's a great injustice, the crow can bring the soul back to right the wrong. The camera's panning across the city, it's burning, and you're coming up onto the scene of a crime. Officer Albrecht, played by Ernie Hudson, is looking out a high window, and he's looking at the body of a dead man laying on the ground beneath. The victim is Eric Draven, played by Brandon Lee. His girlfriend, Shelley Webster, who is played by Sophia Shinnis, is also the victim of a brutal attack and rape, and she's struggling to survive still. She's taken to the hospital, and Sarah, a little girl, played by Rochelle Davis, she is also the voiceover little girl. She was friends with Eric and Shelley. She arrives on her skateboard just in time to see Sarah being taken away, and Albrecht comforts her, even though it's pretty awkward. So this is our opening scene, and what do you guys think? How did it set it up for you?
Go ahead, Tony.
It was a good intro. I mean, you get the following the slow pan shot of the entire burning city. It sets the atmosphere completely, completely dark, completely doom-like, and obviously crime scenes are never happy. So it again sets the tone, and nice to see right off the bat Ernie Hudson playing Officer Albright, which is nice. I think it set the tone for the film pretty well.
Right.
So this is the problem that I had with a lot of this movie was the way it looked. The city to me felt like a miniature. It didn't, and it's supposed to be Detroit, which is funny. This is the third week in a row I've been in Detroit with RoboCop and Beverly Hills Cop the past 2 weeks.
It's the Detroit trilogy.
This city didn't look like Detroit, and I think it would have served the movie better if they had just called it like, whatever, given it some name that made it just some fantasy city that was Detroit in the comic book?
I don't know. I didn't recall seeing Detroit in the comic book.
It was very, I don't believe it actually gave you a location. No.
Yeah, so that kind of like that was kind of awkward to me because it didn't look like Detroit. There was nothing that said Detroit, and also the way the city looked on that opening shot as it swept in. Yeah, I liked it. I mean, it kind of gave me a little that Blade Runner feel. It was cool, but like, the smoke looked like it was like drawn in. The fire looked like it was drawn in. The buildings looked like they were miniatures. And on the first watch, it was a problem for me. Like I said, on the second watch, I tried to look at it more like a comic book and more like a 90s rock video. And it started making me kind of.
The director is a rock video director, so Alex Proyas did that. So
Yeah, and I started getting a little nostalgic for the time, and I think I appreciated it more on the second watch. So yeah, it started setting up a cool comic book movie for me. But the cinematography was pretty weak in this movie.
Yeah, and they also had a very limited budget. It is Miramax, which I'm not trying to say bad things about Miramax, but they do tend to operate on a little bit of a tighter budget. And quite frankly, I think they probably blew most of their budget on the soundtrack, which still slaps to this day. It's The Crow, Nine Inch Nails, like it's Stone Temple Pilots. It's so good.
I gotta chime in on the totally low budget. You're 100% right with Miramax shelling out. I mean, after Brandon's death, they shelved it. They were planning on just scrapping it.
Yep.
So a lot of what was left went towards, I think 94, 93 actually when it was being made. There was no really good CG. They had to CG his face in. They had to CG his face on top of bodies. And there are times during the movie you'll actually see a little shimmer of, where you can tell it is.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot, I guess, because I was just so happy to have the movie, I forgave a lot of the low budget. Again, being a movie geek, Miramax is known for that.
Yeah.
And because I knew it was based on a comic, I forgave the comic influenced looks and angles and lighting. Des, I completely agree. If you're looking at this from a cinematic point of view, the lighting is just, we're lighting people a little above, a little below, and we're lucky if we get an off shadow. So yeah, they were just trying to get through the movie, I believe.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
Well, I had a lot more fun with it on the second viewing. Like I said, as soon as I stopped trying to watch it like a big budget blockbuster and I started looking at it like more of an artistic movie.
Or a cult classic.
A cult classic, a comic book movie, a Billy Idol video, a rock video. I started enjoying it a lot more.
So it's a year later, and Eric and Shelley are buried, and they're in the graveyard behind an abandoned church in the neighborhood. Sarah is there paying her respects, and a crow lands on Eric's headstone. He squawks at her, and she kind of tells him, beat it. And she leaves, but the crow stays, and he begins to peck at the headstone. Sarah is on her way on her skateboard. She meets up with Albrecht at a hot dog stand, and Sarah joins him. It's apparent they've formed kind of a friendship after what happened to Eric and Shelley. I think she was probably looking for a stable force in her life. And, as we find out later in the movie, her mother is not that. So she's kind of latched on to this cop, and he's kind of just taken her under his wing a little bit. He, buys her a hot dog, buys her dinner. And it's interesting because Sarah's such a small role in the comic, like barely, like you'd blink and miss her in the comic book, but she becomes basically almost like the narrator in this film, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. She is the narrator in this film. And normally I don't like kids in films. They just don't work for me, especially in a movie like this. And, I could have done without the kid in the story here, but it was fine. It was fine.
I'll actually agree with that. I think that her narrating it didn't. I understand why they did, because she's the voice of a lot of life, whereas Eric is the voice of death. Having to narrate this movie would confuse, honestly, the narration. He's back, but he shouldn't be the voice of it. It should be someone who's alive, telling the story of what's going on. But yeah, it wasn't in the comic. It wasn't her story to tell, and I actually feel like her scenes are in the way of what I feel is the main part of the story, which is really what I want to see from the Crow.
Well,
yeah, she's a passenger pretty much to the plot. Things are happening around her, and she's witnessing, and she's just narrating what she's witnessing. She's, to a certain degree, she is involved, but she's not a huge, like if you removed her from the movie, you could probably switch around a couple scenes and it would work just fine.
Well, it's funny because the first time I watched this, my real big problem with it was the first time I meet the Crow in this, I'm really, I'm like, oh, it's great. This is kind of like where Heath Ledger was getting his Joker from. It's played really dark. And then, he kept slipping in and out of the role between Eric Draven and the Crow. And I was like, oh, I don't like this. I wish he played it darker. I wish he stayed the Crow. That was the first time. The second time all the way, and I think this movie has such a loose script and such a loose plot that it's really, the viewer can really kind of make up his own ideas about some of the movie. And the second time around, I started to feel like this movie was about Eric Draven, and Eric Draven really was the Crow. The Crow wasn't Eric Draven. This wasn't Eric Draven turning into the Crow and then the Crow being this like super character. I felt like on my second watching, it was Eric Draven. I mean, this was Eric Draven back from the dead, and he wasn't a vicious man. He was a kind-hearted man, and I don't feel he was comfortable executing these people. I think it went against who he really was. And once I started looking at the character like that, I saw a lot of heart, and I started getting the character more. And I really warmed up to Brandon Lee's performance. And the second time around, I mean, I loved it. I thought it was freaking great. And the first time, I did not like it.
Interesting. I'm glad that you watched it again and gave it another chance, because when you first came down and said to me, I don't like this, I was like, no, you have to like it. And we like got into an argument about it. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. That's not what it's about. Like I spazzed out because I was like, no, go back and watch it again.
Yeah. So I felt like when he was being ruthless and dark, it was him like not being true to himself, and I feel like he felt uncomfortable in those scenes in the movie. And then when he was having these moments like in the apartment with the cop having the drink, he was being Eric Draven himself, and that's how he felt comfortable. So once I started looking at it from that angle, I really appreciated the character of the Crow more.
Right, because it was a little bit more multifaceted too, not just this avenging, superhero guy. He actually had like parts of him that weren't that.
Yeah, there were layers to the character that I didn't see the first time that I really appreciated the second time. So yeah.
Excellent.
That's definitely a huge difference, I feel, from the comic.
Yes.
The comic has 2-3 pages of, oh, this is lovey, and the rest he's this violent, vengeful, like vicious.
Yes.
Like the movie has like a fraction of the violence that the comic does. The comic is just over the top. He enjoys what he's doing for the vengeance. This one, I agree 100%. I'm glad that you picked up on it, that it's not him. He's not vengeance. He's just someone who feels he needs to do the right thing now.
Yes. And it's funny too, because I've noticed that, as the movie goes on, that makeup gets lighter and lighter. And by the end, not to jump ahead, but by the end, he's literally he's made all his kills. He's no longer needs the Crow persona, and he's just completely back to being Eric Draven, and there's no makeup on his face.
You took that from me. That was my point.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
rude.
100% right. As it's going, 100% right. He becomes more of himself, and he could finally let that go. And it's the scene that's when she comes to him at the end, touches his head, and they go. But we'll get to that.
I'm so glad I watched this a second time and didn't just go on my first review, because, man, I think I would have regretted it down the line.
Yeah, if you ever watched it again down the line, you might have been like, ooh, I missed a bunch,
I missed everything.
So now we have a shot of a group of miscreants, and they're in an old arcade. They're busting it up. I mean, honestly, these arcade games look like they're from about, a half a century ago anyways, so I don't think anyone really cares. But they set a bomb to explode, and they take off. Now, these scenes in the arcade are being interspliced with scenes of the graveyard. The earth is starting to buckle and give way in front of Eric Draven's headstone, and he emerges. He's stumbling. He's disoriented. He doesn't really know where he is, and he's stumbling through the city, and he finds himself back in his old apartment. He begins to flash back to the attack on him and Shelley. And this is the first time that we see that he's got the ability to heal. He cuts his hands and he looks at his palms, and they heal almost immediately. So this gives us our first indication that besides just being back from the dead, which is already kind of cool, he's also got abilities.
Yeah, it's too bad the movie makers don't, because the effects they use were like, it's bad.
Miramax.
It's bad. It's bad for a movie.
But if there was any other sledgehammer of Christ-like, Christ-like adoration right there, it's like, let's see, we have a long-haired man, used to be people. Something bad happens to him. His hands have holes in them. Now they're healing. Really? It's like,
Yeah.
It's like they set that. That was the sledgehammer plot right there.
Yeah.
We're gonna get that a few times in the movie too. A few of these long haired guys spread out in the cross, like with it's heavy handed.
So here we go. We now are going to the Pit, which is a gross bar. We meet Tintin, played by Lawrence Mason, Skank, played by Angel David, Funboy, played by Michael Massey, and T-Bird, played by David Patrick Kelly. They're sitting around, they're drinking, they're doing shots by putting bullets on their tongues and swallowing the bullet with their booze. They're making their plans for Devil's Night. They're getting ready. They're getting amped up. Quite frankly, they're the lowest common denominator out there. These are not rogue scholars. They're we're not dealing with people that have a ton of IQ here. There's guns waving around and just shit talking each other, but you get the idea that this is the crew. Like, you're starting to recognize these faces from Eric's flashbacks, and you know that these are the people he's coming after.
Yeah. This crew for me was the weak point in the movie. This crew they played it too over the top, almost like goofy. I feel like if they had all just like maybe reeled it in like 50%, it would have been fine. It was over the top. I was kind of watching it and going, oh my God, this is just too much.
It's hard to disagree with that, but I do. And just in the sense that I feel they had to, where soft-spoken actions are his words. They're all word and very little action.
Right.
It's like they're animated. They're trying to boast themselves up. They're fired up, like drawing all attention, keeping people away, waving the guns. I took this intro scene for them, in the arcade and at the bar, as this is the lawlessness that this city has. That they're so out in the open with what they're doing that no one's around. The police aren't there. We've already Hudson's character, all right. There's nothing they could do. The crime is going to happen. They're helpless against it. So it is the exaggerated look at the crime. If we look at last week when you did RoboCop, that crew was comic book as well. Granted, that was I hate to say a lighter tone for RoboCop because it's not, but tinted satire. So I get why they were, but I often compare these two crews because you get four people. It's obviously the voice of it, with Red from that '70s show,
yeah,
and then you got Mike Kelly from The Wall, and Dreamscape, everything else. He's the voice of the crew. And again, this is the crew. It's not the boss. Once you get to Michael Wincott, then we're talking a whole different kind of performance, who I thought was amazing in this.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And they're jumping ahead, but his favorite role he ever did for me was in Talk Radio, where he plays the rock and roll kid.
I love that movie. You're the only other person who knows that movie. Love that
movie, and we will be reviewing Talk Radio.
It's a great movie.
Great movie. Tony, how many rewatches are we giving Talk Radio?
You don't jump ahead.
Five rewatches for me. Mr. Champlain? Okay, let's get back to it.
So I'm just going to note here that in the comic book, Skank did not exist. Top Dollar was just one of the dudes. There was no nightclub. There was no boardroom. There was none of that in the comic book. So this was actually all part of the screenwriting and changing things up a little bit more to make it a little bit more dynamic for a movie. So they made this character Skank that wasn't in the comic and moved Top Dollar up to the crime boss. And quite frankly, I think it worked. So I think if you had just had him just chasing around these four idiots, it might not have had quite the pop that it did at the end,
Yeah, agreed.
Just because it was cut out, but in the comic we're doing that. When Eric comes back, he actually has a guide. He has a Mr. Miyagi in The Skeleton Cowboy.
Yes.
Which is not even mentioned in the movie. It was filmed. There is footage of it. and it's Michael Berryman from Hills Have Eyes, from
Oh,
Smoking in the Boys Room, from Weird Science, the bald, creepy guy.
yeah.
He was actually in the makeup for the Skeleton Cowboy. The Skeleton Cowboy sort of says, "These are your powers. This is why you're here. This is what you're doing." And they decided it took too much away from the flow of the movie, and they just cut every scene out.
Oh no, I wish they hadn't done that, because Des literally came to me. He goes, "I don't understand his powers. I don't understand what he's doing. Like, I don't understand how he got where he is."
Yeah, I did have some questions about the Crow's powers in this movie, and we'll get to it, scene by scene, where I actually was asking these questions. Maybe Tony can enlighten us.
Okay. So then we're getting some more flashbacks to Eric's former life. And I'm not exactly sure what leads him to decide to want to emulate the tragedy mask that's been hanging in his apartment. But I think he just wants to be able to scare people with like a scary face. So he puts on the white pancake and he puts on the black stuff on his face, and we get that, very iconic crow face. Anybody want to say anything about that before I move on?
I think it's just the Cure wrote that line in the song. Personally, the comic was black and white, and it's
Right.
funny because if you actually see what Obar did in the colored, like the covers, he doesn't have whiteface. He's just dead.
Right.
So all he does is paint a ironic smile and the two lines down the eyes. He doesn't actually do whiteface.
Right.
So that's the difference between the comic and the movie. The movie, let's idolize the comic and put it as a good image for cinema, is how I took it. Well,
Interesting. I kind of had a different play on it. I mean, mine's are kind of like clowns, and then you go back to Jack Nicholson in Batman, where he says, I'm smiling on the outside, but I'm crying on the inside. And I kind of felt like Eric Draven was putting this mask on so he could go out and and almost take on a different persona to kill all these people, and because it wasn't him, like we were saying. I feel like he put this on to kind of like be someone else while he did it. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I mean, which makes sense, because what you were saying about how he wasn't really comfortable with what he had to do,
Yeah.
It's almost like giving him a persona that he can lose himself in while he takes care of business, essentially.
And then wipe away at the end.
Yes, yeah.
So,
So I also do want to say that because the Crow is a character and then Eric Draven, the Crow, is a character, as I'm going ahead, I will refer to Eric as Eric. And if I'm saying the Crow, I'm actually talking about the bird. Just so
Okay.
so we don't get confused.
Okay. Let's talk about the bird. The bird was great. Every time I saw the bird in this, I got chills and I got a feeling in my stomach that made me feel melancholy. I love the bird.
Yeah, a beautiful bird, and I'm sure it's more than one. They don't use the same one usually through the whole film.
7 of them, I think.
Was it 7?
I think
Oh,
so.
that's great. Yeah, I love them. They're beautiful birds. So, all right. So let's see here. We now are in Gideon's pawn shop, and Tintin is selling a stolen purse. There's blood on the purse, so you can imagine that it probably was not taken easily. The Crow can see him, and Eric is seeing through the Crow's eyes. The Crow brings him towards Gideon's pawn shop. He's basically saying, "This is your first clue. Come here." He approaches Tintin, who's ready to throw down right away. Fight ensues, where you see how strong Eric is. Even if he gets hurt, he comes right back. He's recovering quickly. And Tintin is like a master with knives. He's flipping them, he's throwing them, and Eric is just outclassing him. He catches a knife in midair right before it hits him in the face and whips it back at him. And that's where the scene ends. So you're kind of up in the air as to what's going to happen with the two of them. Like, he stabbed Tintin, he's hurt him, but you don't really know exactly what's going to happen, because we're going to break off to another scene. So anything about this scene that strikes you?
Go ahead, Tony.
I actually like the Gideon pawn shop scene, in the sense that it gave them another reason to do the things that they do. They're not just blowing things up. They actually are just this low level scum who rob people and then sell their goods. It's just, to me, like I said, add another level to them. And we got to meet Gideon, who's just the slime ball. Always played well by Joe Polito. But to me, I have to admit, the knife fight was very underwhelming. It was a good that you see Brandon Lee bring to the role, but again, knowing what the comic was and knowing what he can do, I wanted more from it. I felt it could have been a little bit more intense, and I feel that they tried, it didn't reach it.
Yeah. On the first watch, I agree with you 100%, Tony. I was like, this sucks. I'm like, because he started getting his ass handed to him by Tintin when he picks up the stick and he starts like beating Brandon Lee down. And I'm like, what is going on? He's kicking his ass here. And I wanted him to have more power. I wanted him to be whooping ass on these guys with ease. But then on the second watching, again, I have to go back to it. This was Eric Draven versus Tintin. And Eric Draven is not a tough guy. He's a rocker. He's not a fighter. Tintin is a badass. And this is the first kill. I don't think that Eric Draven was yet comfortable with his powers and what he could do. And I think that for that reason, he was a little underwhelming in this fight.
All right. I kind of have to agree. I felt like, like you said, he definitely takes a licking, and I think maybe about like right at the end of the scene, he kind of snaps into it. He's like, if I don't do something now, I'm going to get beat here and I'm never going to finish what I'm here to do.
Yeah, and he picks up speed as the movie goes on. He gets a little bit more confident in his ass kicking.
So now we're in a nightclub called Trash, and T-Bird's making his way through the crowd to meet with Top Dollar, who's played by Michael Wincott. However, he's informed by Grange, who's played by the indomitable Tony Todd, also known as Candyman.
Oh, yeah.
That the man himself is in a meeting. Him and his sister Micah, played by Bai Ling, have had a sexual interlude with a woman who is now deceased. Top Dollar says, I think we broke her, and his sister decides she likes her eyes and is closing in on her with a knife. So I find that to be disturbing.
Yeah. This scene right here really reeks of the mid-90s. We're going to get some tramp stamps. We're going to get some bad tribal tattoos. I mean, woo!
Filing. I mean, pretty much what else you got?
Oh, God. That's all I have to say. That shower scene, I'm like, wow, look at that tattoo. That's a lot of commitment on that back.
Yeah. It's just a nice introduction to Michael Wincott, because again, for me. But outside of that, all right, he's the boss. We can see he's the calm opposite to the gang's completely over the top outrageousness. So,
and it needed it.
Yeah. So there's the balance. Okay, let's move on.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely, I think this is where he's holding the snow globe, and he says some weird stuff about when he was a kid and his dad talks to him about death, and it's like, okay, like, that's sounds like you had a great relationship with your father. So yeah, it's definitely kind of a little bit of a weird scene, but you kind of definitely get you get the inclination that these two are a little weird and a little unhinged, and probably a lot of power and a lot of money has led to them just completely being bizarre now.
I'll tell you the bad guy that really played well in this movie for me that I kind of wish they all had been modeled after a little more with their personalities was Fun Boy. He played it just right, man. He was a little over the top, but he was very like San Francisco kind of cool dude. And I really liked his character, and he was the most believable bad guy for me. I mean, except for obviously Top Dollar, which was the best.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Wincott is he's really good.
Awesome.
So
yeah.
So Sarah has gone to the pit, and she sees her mother there, and her mother is busy with Fun Boy, and it's clear that this is kind of a regular occurrence. She's giving her mother some sass, and probably well-deserved, because her mother is very much an absentee mother. It's clear their relationship is very strained. Her mom, Darla, gives her some money to get some dinner, and Sarah informs her that the police have already fed her. So, yeah, it's kind of an uncomfortable scene between the two of them. And
did you call her an absentee mother?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. I'm not sure that brushstroke quite covers it, but okay.
Yeah, okay, true enough.
morphine junkie hooker, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I guess I was trying to be kind.
Tomato,
Oh my goodness. So next we are returning to Gideon's, and this is a really great scene to me. I find it to be a fascinating scene. Eric forces his way into the pawn shop. Gideon's like, "We're closed," and screaming at him, and he breaks the door down. And Gideon is kind of like, "Hey, you owe me a new door," and it's like he's not catching on that he's actually in a lot of trouble here. He does he stab him through the hand? I think he stabs him through the hand at this point. Tells him that he's going to return the engagement ring he had given to Shelley, because Tintin and pawned that engagement ring to Gideon, as he does with the rest of his stuff. And we flash over to the scene where Tintin's body's being carried away. So he's basically, Eric has gone in, has told Gideon what he's up to and why he's there, but now you find out that that's how he knows that the ring is there, because Tintin is dead. He's got many knives sticking out of him, and there's a gigantic crow in blood on the wall. So you can see where that actually went. So Tintin actually, obviously spilled a little of the tea before he died, and has given him a heads up as to where to go next. And I kind of thought that was a cool scene, because you're dealing with Albrecht and the detective, and I forget the detective's name, but that detective and him are butting heads like crazy. The detective is like, "This is my crime scene," and all this stuff. And it's like, it's clear that these two have been going at it for a while, and it kind of sets up the animosity between them that carries throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, for sure. The detective is like a cheap version of James Olmos.
Totally is.
I was going to say, who's the guy in Die Hard? There was two of them. And it's
Yeah.
the other guy in Die Hard. Yeah, that always plays that kind of cop.
Yeah, the other Johnson.
Yeah.
Oh, Marco Rodriguez. His
Yeah.
name was Torres in
Yeah.
the movie.
And then also James Olmos from Blade Runner, which is the guy who he really reminded me of.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Tony, what were your thoughts on the pawn shop scene?
One of my favorites of the whole movie, just because this is where you start to see him testing the power, realizing he can play it to his advantage. And you start to see, again, the crossover between the evil he can be, but he recites the Raven, suddenly there was a tapping on my door. He plays with them. He still has himself there trying to work it in, but it comes across as almost evil, for lack of a better word. It's like him reciting jokes and cracking jokes during his always was one of my favorite things that he did. And again, once he gets his hands on the locker, the little lockbox, the ring is, he's just like, no. And he hits the one, and he doesn't even get a word out before it just the pain that shoots through his body as soon as he touches it is like my favorite scene in this part, because it speaks volumes. You didn't need to do anything. They didn't need to do a flashback. You know what he just did, and it was perfect.
Yeah, this was one of my favorite scenes too, for a couple of reasons. One was there were some shots, like there was a close up of his face where he's drooling, and it's awesome, man. I mean, there's some really, really great close ups of the crow in this, and I mean the crow being Eric Draven.
Right.
Also, when he's going through the rings, he picks up the ring, the right one, but you'll notice his eyes are closed, and he doesn't recognize it from sight. He recognizes it from a power. And this is one of my questions with the crow's powers. He has this this ability to feel things and then see visions in his head after he touches people or items a couple times in the movie. And he's going through the box, he's going through the rings, he's got his eyes open, he's looking at some rings, and then he closes his eyes and he looks away as he goes through the last couple, and then he hits the ring and he realizes he's got the ring, but he does it with an ability that's not his eyesight.
Right.
Oh, one of the other points of the Scout Cowboy that I did forget to say, he does explain the power strength, but one of the main points of it is the fact that you are here, quote, alive to own revenge. If you interfere in any other part of anyone else's life, you're going to lose your powers, and you're pretty much nothing. So that's when he sends it on his way. we'll get into more of that after. But yes, as soon as he feels that, that is at that point he starts wearing it around his neck, and that's the pretty much I always took it as that's the talisman power to move forward. And from this point on, I feel he becomes more vicious because he has the strength of the ring, the pain from the ring.
Good point.
I agree with that, Tony. And then it's funny because when he gives the girl the ring back at the end, he really starts to transform back into Eric.
Yep.
So go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say also, I love this scene because he takes all the rings in the box with him, the other rings, and he's throwing them at Gideon, and he's saying, this is a life that you destroy, that you had a hand in destroying. And it was like, that's really powerful, like a reminder to somebody who is, you might think that you're clean because you're sitting in this shop and just buying these things, but you're making it possible for people to make money off of other people's grief, And I thought that was powerful. And then, of course, when he puts all the rings into the shotgun, that's also a little lovely bit. He just shoots the do you smell gasoline?
Yeah. Well, in Gideon's defense, I mean, some people do just, pawn their wedding rings.
I mean, considering the area, that's probably also not unheard of. Yeah. But you also have to think that it's very possible that he's getting a lot of jewelry and other things from these hoodlums.
And he knows because he saw the blood on the handbag. I mean, he's not stupid. He's a scumbag.
No. Yeah, he's just a scumbag.
All right.
So at this point, he shoots the shotgun into Gideon's. Gideon's blows up, and Albrecht arrives right around the time that Eric is walking out. He informs him that he's the one that killed Tintin, and he says, "You like the coat?" Because he's wearing Tintin's coat. And he also informs Albrecht that the rest of T-Bird's crew is dead. They just don't know it yet. Albrecht is distracted by looters, and Eric just disappears into thin air, which I thought that was always a nice little bit that he just poof and he's gone.
Yeah.
He acknowledged it each time, which was great.
Yeah, he's always like, "Oh, great." Then isn't this where he says, "At least he didn't do that walking against the wind shit"?
Yeah. I in this scene, this is one of the moments in the movie, the second watch around, where I was really seeing, that he was more comfortable being Eric Draven than he was being the Crow. And, and I thought the performance was really genuine. I liked it a lot.
Excellent. So now Top Dollar is being informed that Gideon's pawn shop is burned down, and he's saying, "I didn't give clearance for that. Like, that's a place where we're fencing our stuff. I didn't tell anyone that was okay." And so he wants to know how it happened. And he basically tells T-Bird, get on it and figure out what happened. And of course, there's like the prerequisite giant pile of cocaine in front of him at the time. So it's, just goes to show the wholesome family content that's happening in The Crow.
Yeah. Yeah. And the half sister, what's her name? Micah. She's always playing with eyeballs and people's eyeballs. And yes. Obviously after seeing it, it was easy to go back and see this, but these are foreshadowing scenes that she's going to have her eyes picked out by the Crow, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because she says, I think at some point she says, the soul is within the eyes and things like that. So she's setting herself up for it,
And so does Top Dollar. He also talks about how all the, the power of the man is in his eyes. And yeah, so that's mentioned quite a few times in the movie.
Mm-hmm. So next we run into Sarah almost getting hit by a car. She's taken off after being disappointed by Darla once again. And Eric comes out of nowhere and grabs her and saves her. And she doesn't recognize him. She's, she says something about him looking like a clown. And she is, basically flipping off the guy that almost hit her. And she's talking about the weather, says that she wants to be able to ride her skateboard without it being wet. And he says, can't rain all the time. And she says, Eric, and turns around and he's gone again. So he's done his disappearing act again. But that definitely was like something that she knew him to say. It was in one of his songs. So this has tipped her off that was Eric.
What are you supposed to be, a clown or something?
Sometimes.
It's more like surfing than skating. I wish the rain would stop just once.
Can't rain all the time.
Eric?
We have a very brief scene of Albrecht back in the station. He's starting to put two and two together. He's drawing the crow face on the picture of Eric Draven, which I thought was pretty funny. But he, obviously in his mind, he's saying, this guy's dead. I saw him die. Like, there's no way it's him, but it looks like him.
Yeah,
So,
we get a little information in the police station here in this scene that I missed the first time around. Like, I wasn't really sure why those guys broke into the apartment and, killed and raped Eric and his fiance. And then you realize that, they were being evicted. I imagine that Top Dollar owns the building, and they were being evicted, and they were basically squatting at that point. So the gang was being sent in to muscle them out because, the courts weren't getting them out quick enough. Am I right with that, Tony?
They basically just called it like a slum. There was a petition from everybody in the building saying that nothing was being fixed. They had complaints against it, and that basically hired by the landlord, Top Dollar, to go in and you got some problems with this. Let me show you what the problems are really going to be like. Take it all back, and they just crossed the line and went.
Huh. Yeah, no, it said the cops said they were fighting tenant eviction. That's what the what's his name said.
You never know, because that's what the landlord could say after the fact. And if the landlord is Top Dollar,
right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good point.
So now we're going to a scene of Fun Boy's apartment, and he and Darla are shooting up morphine, and Eric arrives through the window. Fun Boy shoots him through his hand. They all watch as the hand heals itself. Fun Boy takes several more shots, but Eric absorbs them all. And this is where he tells the Jesus joke. He hands the innkeeper 3 nails and asks him, "Can you put me up for the night?"
Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Stop me if you heard this one. Jesus Christ walks into a hotel. Ow. He hands the innkeeper 3 nails and he asks, "Don't you ever fucking die? Can you put me up for the night?"
And of course, we can't talk about this scene without mentioning this is the scene where Brandon Lee was shot and killed. So it was this scene.
Yeah, it's funny too because Bruce Lee had a premonition that Brandon would actually die by a gunshot, when he was a kid. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I hate to say I didn't know it was the scene. I thought it was the
scene.
attack scene.
No, it's this one. Well, the thing I read had said that it was this scene, and he shot at him and it hit him right above the belly button, and he was supposed to just light off a squib so that you'd see the blood. And when he didn't, they called cut, and he didn't get back up. And they said it was this scene, so maybe it was a different scene. But
I thought it was the one that shot him out the window, is what I thought. But again, if you read that, I'll go on what you say. But Michael Massey was just amazing in this scene. Just going from completely high to dumbfounded to over the top gleeful to Joyce to completely shocked. I love his performance. He's just amazed. How could you do this? And compared to the other villains, I feel obviously, Patrick Kelly is the words, the brain, the good performance. I felt that he played a great junkie.
Yeah.
So in this scene, I love that, his whole back and forth with him, and when he said the Jesus joke, I was elated because that's one of my favorite little jokes that he pulls out in the comic. Put that in the movie.
Yeah, I was thrilled that they put that in the movie too, because it's one of those jokes that you hear it and you're like, oh, it's so shocking, but it's so simple.
Yeah, Fun Boy for me was like I had said earlier, by far the most genuine villain in the movie. I loved him. I thought his performance was really good. This scene also is going to bring in another power that the Crow has. So he grabs the mom by the arm and he draws the morphine out of her veins.
Yeah.
So Tony?
Yep, just getting to that. That was good. This is actually this scene. Mother is the word for God on the lips of children. Such an amazing, impactful line.
Look. Mother is the name for God on the lips and hearts of all children. Do you understand?
And that's when the morphine comes out. He does use that power, part of his vengeance. So in a quote cut scene, at that point, he's already incapacitated Fun Boy in the other room. So he thinks he's safe. At that point, Fun Boy attacks him with a razor and slashes at him, and Eric puts his arms up to defend himself before taking him down again. So when we see Eric again, he's got duct tape wrapped all around his arms, and we don't know where it came from because he lost his power. What he did for Darla went against his vengeance trip, which is what the skeleton cowboy told him. Only focus on your mission. That was not part of it. So he lost his power and couldn't heal those wounds. So he had to duct tape it up to stop the bleeding. Again, cut because the skeleton cut. Because the skull cowboy was cut, they had to cut.
I wish they had left it in.
Yeah, me too.
Me too, yeah.
Yeah, because I think these are very, very important plot devices that you have to have.
Yeah, because it explains how and why things happen. And like, there's definitely things that happen, like him pushing the morphine out of her arm. Like, how did he do that? I don't know. Why did he do that? I don't know. Like, well, I know why. He did it because he cares about Sarah.
Yes.
But yeah, just it's
but
interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I'll have questions too about, you know, the end of the movie when he becomes basically mortal again. Maybe you can answer those, but let's not jump ahead.
Okay. So as you said, he grabs Darla. She's saying, "Don't hurt me, don't touch me." He grabs her, makes the morphine leave her veins, and tells her her daughter is out on the streets waiting for her. And she takes off like a shot, because between him saying that, her watching the morphine leave her veins, and the fact that he just kicked the crap out of Fun Boy, she's out of there. So she's getting a little bit of a wake call. Downstairs, Grange is drinking in the pit. Gideon is drinking in the pit, not Grange. Grange comes to speak to him and tells him that he's got a meeting with Top Dollar. But he happens to notice as Darla runs down and out into the night, and he's suspicious of this. He thinks something's going on, especially where they just heard about Gideon's blowing up. So he's thinking, I better go check this out. So he heads upstairs to Fun Boy's apartment. And when he arrives, Fun Boy is laying on the floor, many hypodermics sticking out of his chest, and there's a bloody crow on his chest. Eric is on the windowsill, and he gives Grange the old shh before he disappears out the window. He looks out the window to see where Eric's going, and the alley is completely empty, even though they're 4 stories up.
Yeah, it's just walking against the wind shit, you know, just disappeared again.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's pretty cool that scene, because if you kind of watch it, I think they filmed it in reverse to make it look like, I think he actually came in the window and shushed, and then when they put it in the movie, they reversed it so that it looks almost unworldly and a little strange when he does it.
Yeah, it's cool.
All right, so back at Albrecht's apartment, Eric appears suddenly, and he asks the policeman to fill him in on what happened to him and Shelley. I mean, he obviously has a pretty decent idea, but Albrecht lets him know what happened about the murders, tells him that Shelley had, lingered for 30 hours trying to fight for her life, and she just didn't make it. Eric wants to know why he didn't do more, and the cops tell him that there's just only so much we can do. Nobody wants to talk after what happened to the two of you. Do you think anybody else in that building was going to step up at that point? No. At some point, he touches Albrecht's head, and he gets all the memories of Shelley's 30 hours of pain, and it's incapacitating. He falls to the ground. You can tell Albrecht wants to help him, but there's only so much this guy can do. And Eric says, if you don't mind, I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to use your front door. So this is a scene that I know Des had problems with. So I'm going to let you go ahead first.
Yeah, the first time I watched it, I had problems with it, but this was back when I was really kind of craving, a Joker type character, kind of like Heath Ledger played in the Batman movie. Like I was really craving that kind of like an insane Crow character, just full of vengeance and darkness. And on the second watching, when I started, realizing I was watching a man that had lost everything, that had a good heart, I liked the scene a lot better. It humanized the Crow for me, and I thought it was touching when he said to him, is it okay if I just use the door? Like he just wanted to feel like normal, like himself for a minute. Right. And I found it to be touching the second time around. I found a lot of this movie on the second watching to have a lot of heart, especially Brandon Lee's performance had a lot of heart.
Good.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to it. I mean, it did everything it needed to do. It connected the dots, made a dead brand. Eric realized even though this guy was a good guy before, he literally stuck by my wife trying to make sure everything was going to be good, and realize what he did. That there are good, it's just a terrible place. It established all that you know, it did what it needed to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it's very important to the scene of him taking the memories of those 30 hours of pain, because it comes into play again later. Because at one point I was like, well, could you just remove this scene and have it not impact the movie? And I was like, oh, you can't, because of him being aware of those 30 hours of pain is so important at the end of the movie.
Yeah. And there's very, very little comic relief in this movie, if any. And it was, I don't know, it was almost like a necessary scene. You know, it gave me 2 or 3 minutes just to kind of, just kind of enjoy that actor. You know, he's great in Ghostbusters, and you know, we got a little relief from all the drama.
A moment to breathe.
It worked.
So back at Club Trash, Gideon's now having his meeting with Top Dollar. He tells him what happens at the pawn shop. He tells him that the guy's name was Eric Draven and that he had a bird with him. He also tells him how he shot the guy, but he healed. After extracting all the information he can from Gideon, Top Dollar just pretty much gives him a sword through the throat and shoots him a couple times, because that's pretty much how he feels about pretty much everybody. There's not a ton that's happening in this. You're just kind of understanding how Top Dollar's collecting information about Eric at this point.
Yeah. I love the line, will you just die already? And he pumps 2 shots into him.
Yeah, Top Dollar is not a soft and cuddly type.
No. And, he's also, when he opens up that closet with all the swords in it, you're going to get the idea that this guy is, well-versed in jousting and fighting and swords. And that's going to come into play later in the movie, when he goes up against the Crow. And you can really see that, again, the Crow he's not a fighter. It's, without the little bit of powers that he has, I mean, he's outmatched by, a couple of these bad guys.
Yeah, true enough. So we have a musical interlude here. Eric is on the roof of his old home playing the guitar he stole from Gideon's. Because of course, why wouldn't you? And Sarah, at the same time, is returning to her home. She digs through some old albums and finds his old band's album, puts it on, and it starts skipping on the line, "Can't rain all the time." So that's a little callback to what he said to her in the streets.
Yep, absolutely. Great scene. Tony, what'd you think of him playing the guitar on the roof?
That was for me, honestly, that was the only one of the few cringeworthy scenes. I get why they did it. That was it was almost like he was playing himself out. Now I have to let Eric go and the Crow take over.
Yeah.
And it was, to me, was so heavy-handed the way he was shot. It was close up on the hands. Obviously, that's not him playing. It's like, as a musician, you know those things.
Yeah.
It's hard not to oh, come on, pull back, show me Stranger Things. Like, let me see Eddie playing the guitar. So it's just, I didn't need it. We got he was in a band. We got that he was a rock star. He had the long hair. The band promo picture in the police station. He stole the guitar. We didn't need it.
Yeah, I don't want to foreshadow an upcoming review, but it felt a little Sammy Kerr to me.
Yeah, but not in a good way. Like Sammy Kerr there's nothing.
Yeah,
wrong
not in a good way.
Even the hip slaps with Sammy Kerr are hot. Man.
Yeah. Oh, please.
This was just cringy.
We'll get there. Yeah, this scene for me, you have the amp hanging off the roof, and yeah, it was. It was okay. It was fine. I agree with you with everything you said, though, Tony, 100%. But it was fine.
An empty building. Where are you plugging it in? There's no power. What are you doing?
Another question. It's a year later. This is like some awesome loft apartment. Like, it's not rented yet. And who's feeding the cat?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the building has been, what's the word I'm looking for? Not abandoned,
condemned?
But yeah, it's been condemned.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I suppose that's why nobody's living in it, but yeah.
Yeah, there was is this scene, this guitar, him playing the guitar in the scene, is this the same scene where it pans out and he's sitting Indian style on the roof?
I think that's later.
Yeah, because whenever that scene is, that is maybe the worst cinematography I've ever seen in a real movie. Like, it literally looks like some little kid drew a picture of the Crow sitting on a roof. It's just like, whoa, that made it through production. Like, wow.
Yeah, that was probably a scene they probably could have cut. They probably
Yeah.
didn't need that one. I mean,
Well, just
it's
'cause
very obvious that Alex Proyas's fingerprints are all over this because
Oh,
he was a music video producer. Like that's what he did. He directed music videos, so
And-
it has that flavor.
Yeah.
He did Dark City before this. Am I correct on that? So,
Yes.
I mean, this could have been Dark City 2 for the sets and cinematography completely.
It's funny because there's a scene coming up in the boardroom when the Crow goes to to collect Shank, and one of the henchmen, I swore it was Eminem. I'm like, is that Eminem? And it wasn't Eminem, but it looked just like him. It was one of the generic villains.
Right.
And I Googled it. I said, was Eminem in The Crow? And it said no, but he actually wanted to be in the second Crow movie that didn't happen. And it was going to be him and I think DMX.
Interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
they've literally said they're going to reboot The Crow 1,000 times, and it goes into pre-production and falls apart every single time. And quite frankly, with the talk of The Crow being cursed, like maybe we should just let it go.
Yeah. That was funny. Tony, what did you hear about that? Because what I had read was that they were talking about this, the set and the stuntmen and everybody were talking about this movie being cursed before Brandon Lee was ever shot. I guess the guy had broken his ribs and
electrocution stunts have gone wrong. The sets were burned.
yes.
The guy drove onto the lot and drove over a bunch of the back lot.
Yeah, he went crazy.
Like a poltergeist kind of thing, It's like sometimes you should just stop. The Vampire Lestat was coming back and it was huge, so it hit at the right time. But if he didn't die, if he lived through it, would have just been another action. I don't know.
Yeah, if Brandon Lee didn't die, I don't think this would be quite as big a chunk of pop culture as it is. I think it'd be a little bit more niche.
I think you probably get the looky-loos that went to see it just because he died, which, is sad that people do stuff like that. But you have to think that there are people that went to see the movie because of that reason, not because they actually wanted to go and see it.
Yeah.
It would still be one of my favorites because I just love the comic and I love everything about it.
I hope that if nothing else, if people listen to this podcast and, they've seen the movie once, like the first time I saw it, and we're like, it's not for me. Or if they haven't seen it at all and they watch it once, that they take from this that, if you watch it a couple of times, you can really start to see more in the movie. I think it's a lot better of a movie than maybe a lot of people think it is, that only watched it one time. That maybe weren't like big Crow comic fans like you and Delin were, that were just, a movie fan that watched it hoping for, maybe they thought they were going to be seeing a different movie like I did and then, just never went back to it. Because I think if you go back and you watch it without all the expectations, that maybe you'll see something that you didn't see the first time.
Right.
100%. And to touch on that, not being, it's that thing that gets stuck, what was the thorn in my side that, it's like, well, thank God we had Deadpool being the first rated R comic book movie. It's like Blade, we're forgetting The Crow. It's like both of those were rated R comic movies that had a huge cultural influence, but everyone forgets about them because they were, quote, horror.
Yeah.
Right.
But again, another discussion for another time.
Well, Tony, I love that you said that because, there's certain albums, and I don't care what genre of music you like or don't like, there's certain albums that are just like, they're the top of the mountain, Jane's Addiction, Nothing Shocking. Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction. These are like groundbreaking albums that set markers. And I feel like Deadpool is one of those movies. Like it's almost a perfect movie.
But you also have to wonder, would we have gotten Deadpool if we didn't have Blade and if we didn't have The Crow?
We wouldn't have had it if we didn't have Ryan Reynolds. So
this is very, very true.
There's no one who should play but him. Perfect.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay. So now we're gonna get to T-Bird in his car, and he's with Skank. He tells Skank to go get road beers, go in the store, get road beers. And while he is waiting in his car, Eric ambushes him from the back, puts a gun to his head, and tells him to drive. And as they're in the car, he's telling him to drive faster and faster, which of course attract the attention of some police, and the police are giving chase. Skank saw T-Bird taking off. I don't recall if he actually saw Eric in the car with him.
Oh, he did.
Oh, okay. So he runs out and gets hit by a car because, of course, he did, because he's a complete mess. But he jacks the car and takes off after them. This ensues in like a chase scene. We have the police chasing T-Bird's car. You have Skank in the piece of crap car trying to keep up. And eventually, Skank pulls out right in front of the police. The police crash into him. It stops the chase. And Eric gets T-Bird onto the docks. He tapes him into his driver's seat. There's a bunch of C4 and explosive in the trunk. He sends him off the end of the dock with the car exploding. Skank witnesses it all, sees that Eric has left the crow symbol in fire, and is returning to Top Dollar to A, look for help, and B, to report what he's seen.
Yeah, Tony, let me know what you think of this scene, because I have some thoughts.
As dumb as it is, when the fire goes to the crow. Shit,
yeah.
Awesome,
yeah.
Awesome looking. Dumb as hell. Come on, you don't have the time for this. You gotta but I love it. I will every time I'm waiting for that scene. There it is. Again, I love that. I keep forgetting his name. The bad guy who's taped to the seat.
Oh, T-Bird.
T-Bird is completely out of his mind. Like, this is the really real world. You know, you're dead. Here, and he starts reciting Paradise Lost like he did in the apartment, reading it to Shelley, and it flashes back to him. That's all he can mutter out. He's in such disbelief as he dies. You know, I thought it was a perfect comeuppance for his character. That was great.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, that, again, like you said, that, you know, him lighting up that crow and, you know, the overhead shot, it's great. I loved watching, T-Bird's car explode, you know, in the air, going in the water. And then, you know, you also get the, you know, how like genuinely hurt Shank is by the death of T-Bird. Like, he's a T-Bird fanboy.
Oh, yeah.
He's devastated that he's gone. Like, no, T-Bird. Like, you know, you're feeling it. And I like the scene a lot. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, it has a lot of eye appeal for sure, especially in a movie that had some spots that were a little dicey cinematography wise. Like, this is a little chef's kiss. It's nice, and it's, like you said, it's an iconic scene.
Yeah, it's a fun kill.
Absolutely. So the morning comes, and Darla is suddenly making Sarah breakfast, and this is very strange to Sarah. She's like, I don't even know how you like your eggs, and Sarah says, I don't even like eggs, you know. And they have a very kind of combative conversation until Sarah realizes that Darla is trying. She didn't take a drug that's making her like this. She's trying to be better to her, trying to be nicer to her. And she gives her the benefit of the doubt, and they have a little moment where they start to reconnect. And it's nice to see, like, it gives you hope that Sarah's life's going to be a little better going forward.
So let me ask you guys this, because, you know, if she's a morphine addict, you know, this isn't gonna happen. She's gonna be back out looking for dope the next morning, and that's it. Doesn't matter what the crow said. Did the crow cure her of her addiction when he sucked the morphine out of her veins?
Oh, completely.
I mean,
that's what I took it as. Is that's why she turned to him and had like a moment of clarity.
Right.
Because it goes out of range. He lets her go. She turns around and faces him. There's a bee, and she's like, "Oh my God, my daughter's out there." And that's why she runs. Yeah. So I feel she's completely all in on being a mom now.
Yeah, like, I don't think she was running because she was scared. She was scared initially, but I don't think she was running because she was scared. I think she was running because she realized that she has made a real mess of things and was running to get her act together.
Yeah.
Cool. I like that. And, you know, and like you said, you know, the girl at first, she's being standoff, you know, and rightfully so. You know, she's been abandoned by this woman her whole life. But I think she realizes in that moment, if she doesn't be the bigger person here, then, you know, her mom will probably just, you know, fold up shop and go back to just being a shitty mom. So she says, no. I like him over easy. And,
Yeah.
she doesn't want to push her mother away in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. She stands to lose if she can't reach out, like, because the mother's reaching out by trying to make her breakfast and trying to be. So Sarah has to bridge the gap, and she does, which is nice to see.
Yep. I thought it was a nice scene. I thought it was, again, powerful scene.
Yep. So we get a couple of little quick scenes that I'm just going to go over really quickly. You see Grange, and he's gone to Draven's grave and finds it empty. He's kind of like, "Ooh, okay." There's a gigantic coffin lid and a bunch of dirt and no body. So, of course, he's going to return to Top Dollar and tell him that. And also, Albrecht gets suspended for misconduct. So these are kind of quick scenes that don't have a ton to do for talking about, but I just wanted to make sure that we put them out there so we're aware of what's going on.
Yeah, well, I think it does have something to do with it because, he's going to go and report this back to Top Dollar. And Top Dollar is starting to realize that Eric Draven, has come back from the dead 100%. His guys killed him. And he's getting these powers somewhere. And I'm starting to get the feeling that his half-sister's, whispering in his ear. And I don't know if this is ever really actually said in the dialogue, but I think he's maybe has his eyes on that power, on that crow power. Tony, what do you think?
Well, I think that's what 100%. Yeah, you're completely right with that. And that's why I think when it comes down to it, they put two and two together. And again, jumping ahead, when she starts trying to capture the bird, knowing that's the source of his power.
Mm-hmm.
So they put into the movie part of it. And they're right. Once the bird starts to get injured, he starts to be injured.
Right. But my question was, now it feels to me like Top Dollar feels like he might be able to absorb that power from the bird, but I thought the power really only came if you were, wronged and you were exacting, revenge.
I agree with that, but I think the Top Dollar and his sister probably think that there's some way they can do something, whether it be ingesting the bird's eyes or something, because like they've got the crazy eye thing,
exactly. They don't know. They're just going on what they're used to doing, cutting out and frying up eyeballs. It's a family recipe.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
So Albrecht gets suspended. So now he's kind of at loose ends. Meanwhile, Sarah returns to the abandoned building that Eric and Shelley used to live in. And, she's calling out for him. She's talking to him as if he's there. And she kind of gives up. She's like, I guess I thought you cared. And all of a sudden the sun comes out and he's, this is a little nice bit of cinematography that they threw in. The sun comes out. He's standing there and you can see him in silhouette by the window. She runs to him. He hugs her. And though you don't get a lot of the discussion between them after this, she does say later to Albrecht that he told me he can't be my friend anymore because he's dead and I'm alive. So at least at some point that is put out there that she understands what's happening.
Yeah. Tony?
Yeah, I think say just but no,
yeah.
That's pretty true. I mean, the scene cements the fact that she was one of the few people who was important enough to him and remembered him. Still, honestly, at this point, the movie made you feel like they didn't have a lot of people in this area, which is, and again, this is me going off on a total tangent, but it's like, as you're in bands, I like to think your bandmates would still kind of remember you and kind of like want to keep your memory alive. And it's like, none of them even appeared in the movie. No one was even around with it. It's like small things like they made these two completely isolated. Like Shelley and Eric just had this little girl they hung out with. That was like the only humanity that we saw in the afterlife. Like, so there was no one else he should go see.
Yeah, so, Tony, you hit the nail on the head there. And this is a problem that I have with the movie on both watches. And I said this to Dylan earlier. The world felt very small. Very small. Like you said, I mean, you do get some shots from the nightclub, which we didn't talk about. Some of these bands that are playing, like there's one band with a girl with like really blonde dreadlocks. Some of these nightclub scenes, I loved them because I was starving for some more people in this world, and he played in this band and, his band, was played at this club and, where are the fans? Where are his bandmates? And And I was starving for more characters, and I needed the world to feel a little bigger. And on top of it feeling small because there just weren't a lot of people in the world, the actual world itself felt small because the city always looked like a miniature. So the whole thing just felt tiny and compressed to me. That was a problem, and you hit the nail on the head with that.
Yeah, I don't mean to tear apart my favorite movies, but it's like
no, we're not tearing it apart. But I mean,
it's true. But then again, if you want to bring it back to what quote the cut skeleton cowboy says, these are the people you got to deal with. Anyone outside of this, you're going to lose your power. You don't matter anymore. So, because Sarah made her way into the apartment, which is pretty much quote home base for Eric at that point, waiting for his revenge, she happened to run along with him. So that's why I don't feel he lost power just interacting with her and letting her know what the situation was.
Again, it's a real shame that they cut the skeleton cowboy because he explains everything. So
yeah, that was a huge mistake cutting that out. So let me ask you guys one more thing. So earlier in the movie, and we didn't discuss it, it's not a big deal, but T-Bird is walking through the club and he drags his fingers over Eric Draven's face on the band picture on the wall in the nightclub.
Yes,
you guys notice that?
I did.
Okay.
And I don't know if I think it's kind of just like foreshadowy. I don't think he's doing it because he remembers the guy.
No, I do.
Oh, you do?
I felt like it was like a trophy moment. Like,
Oh, okay.
What do you think, Tony?
I took it as a moment of recognition. I didn't take it as I did this. I didn't look at it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they made a point of, showing him rub his fingers across Eric's face. So I really didn't know what to make of it. But you know what I do love about just all movies in general and what we're doing here? I love a movie that sparks conversation and that maybe three people can look at and all have a different idea of what the director was trying to say with a scene. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I'm right. I joke.
Oh man. So anyways, Hank has now made his way to Top Dollar and he's relaying the tale of what happened to T-Bird, and he's barely even legible at this point. Like it's like he's fire it. Like it's like, oh boy. Like
and I hated that. I hated that fire it up thing. I thought that was so stupid throughout the entire movie.
It's like, okay, I'm really surprised Top Dollar didn't just throw him out a window at that point, to be frank.
Yeah.
But he is now, that Top Dollar knows exactly what happened to T-Bird. So he's really like putting all the facts that he knows on the table and is really starting to figure out what's going on here. So Sarah and Albrecht meet back up at the hot dog stand. And she tells them that she's seen somebody that's supposed to be dead. Albrecht relays that he's seen him too. And they both know that it's not going to last. Eric's going to be gone soon. Like they're both aware that this is temporary. He didn't come back for them. He's got a mission. And once it's done, he's going to be gone too. And I thought that was, a good scene because you don't expect either one of them to try to get him to stay. They both know that he's only here for one reason.
It's funny though, you say he didn't come back for them, but at the end of the day, he actually saves both of them.
Yeah. Yep. It was a accidental saving, but he'll take it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So Top Dollar's now holding a meeting with all his captains, and it's to get ready for Devil's Night. Eric shows up, busts it all up, and all the men attempt to kill him. There's a little bit of conversation between Eric and Top Dollar, and at some point Top Dollar just goes, you're boring me, kill him. So there's a huge shootout. All of these, crime captains are shooting at him. He disappears. He falls down on the floor and disappears. And the next thing you know, he's pulling dudes under the table. He's shooting people. It's a complete melee. Now Micah's trying to grab the bird because she sees it and she's like, okay, I'm going to go for that bird. But Top Dollar quickly grabs her and Grange pulls the two of them out of there because he sees where it's going now. Everyone's pretty much dead, and Eric can finally get his hands on Skank, and he does what I wish Top Dollar had already done and throws him out the window. And it's almost a little callback to Die Hard to me that he lands right on the police car.
Right. We're going to get two of those homages from Die Hard at the end of this movie. So when Eric comes in the room, he says to Top Dollar, all I want is Shank. That's it. He goes, give me Shank. Everybody lives. Skank, whatever.
Yeah.
And I leave. And Top Dollar says no. You're not taking him. That's it. And I think at this point, like we'd already discussed, Top Dollar knows that they're not gonna, even when he says, you know what, I'm sick of this guy, kill him. He knows they're not gonna kill him. I think so anyway. I mean, he's got enough evidence now that this guy survived, like, numerous hits that would have killed a mortal man. He knows that Eric's not a regular guy.
True. It's with all this information that he has to realize that, a bunch of bullets aren't going to do it. So is he just testing the theory, or did he really think it was going to kill him? I'm not sure.
What do you think, Tony?
I took it as he was testing it, because he literally, matter of fact, like, well, you can't have him.
Yeah,
it was a line in the sand. You can't have him. It's like, well, then you're all going to die.
Yeah, like Top Dollar says several times in this movie, it doesn't happen in this city unless I say it does. And he's calling the shots 100%.
Push him to the limit, see what you can do, and that's why they ran, because they knew. And which is why once he gets Skank, jumping ahead, he becomes more mortal in his final fight, because Top Dollar had nothing to do with the direct death of him or Shelley. So he's a regular mortal man when he finally faces him.
Yeah, because at this point he thinks he's done.
Right.
Yeah. And you make a good point. And I mean, we are jumping ahead, but in that final fight scene, you realize that Top Dollar never really had anything against Eric.
Yeah, that's the worst part.
Yeah. So
let's not strangers. You just happen to be home.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
at this point, the police are giving chase, and Eric's running across rooftops. Albrecht is following him from below. He's in his car watching him. So as soon as Eric ends up falling off of a roof and down to the ground, Albrecht opens the door for Eric and says, "Get in," and he jumps in, and he's taken off with him. He stops short because a cop car runs in front of him, and Eric jumps out and takes off. But if you notice, that chair in the car is covered in blood. So he's not healing like he used to anymore. And this is even before the bird gets hurt.
Right. Yeah, good observation.
Yeah, so he's definitely heading in that direction of being more mortal. So Top Dollar, Micah, and Granger in the car driving away. And she tells Top Dollar that if they kill the crow, they can kill Eric. She says the bird is the link between the land of the living and the realm of the dead. That's the key. So we now see Sarah sleeping on Shelley's grave. She's waiting for Eric because she knows that he's going to finish his job and return. So she wants to catch him before he leaves. He says goodbye. He's now done with his mission. He gives Sarah Shelley's ring and she leaves. But as she's heading out the graveyard gate, Grange grabs her and pulls her into the abandoned church. She calls for Eric. He hears her and he runs to her, even though technically he really should be returning to the land of the dead at this point. Grange takes a shot at the bird and hits him. He's injured. And Top Dollar delivers one of my favorite things. Quick impression. Caw, bang, fuck, I'm dead.
It's great. Tony, so being the crow aficionado here, let's talk about what's happening to Eric at this point. I mean, the makeup is now almost back to completely gone. And is he just now basically Eric Draven for the rest of the movie?
I think it's that once he gave the ring away,
that's it.
In the movie, the ring and the crow were the source of his power. Mm-hmm. They gave him the power to complete his mission, and you got an injured bird and no more ring. And again, even though it's the third one, which you did bring up, which was kind of true, is that the makeup is now gone, so he's back to basic Eric. He's Eric Draven.
Yeah.
Gangster. You're screwed.
Yep. Okay.
So the crow is injured, but not dead yet. Albrecht appears and starts shooting so that Grange can't finish the job. Micah grabs the bird, knowing it's the key to Eric's power, and takes off with it. Grange gets killed, and Micah and Top Dollar head up to the belfry with the injured crow and Sarah. Micah stays behind, holding onto the crow, while Top takes Sarah out onto the roof. She still has the crow, and she's shooting down at Eric and Albrecht. She hits Albrecht, and he's kind of out of commission. But the crow rallies and picks out her eyes, which is like, again, like you said earlier, like foreshadowing. That's where your power is. This crow is going right for them. She falls from the bell tower and she dies.
Yeah, and what I love about this is, it's the end of the movie, and who's going to save the day? The crow. I mean, the movie's called The Crow. Eric is pretty much, he's a wet napkin at this point. And, the crow is the one that's going to step up and take her out. And, they're not going to be pinned down by gunfire now because this bird has, pecked her eyes out. And, basically, I don't know why she, basically jumped off the bell tower, but
well, I think she's blinded. She can't see, so she falls.
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but a little bird starts pecking me in the face and I'm like chucking it on the floor, but she opted to, walk backwards over a railing or whatever happened.
This is a supernatural bird. Do not disrespect the crow.
No, I'm not, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and edit that out and we'll just leave it at, this bird was badass. The movie was called The Crow and the crow kicked her ass.
Oh my goodness. So now with her out of the way, Eric makes his way up the bell tower and he finds Top Dollar up on the roof with Sarah. He chucks Sarah and she goes sliding down the side of the roof. She's holding on, but she's struggling. Now Top Dollar and Eric are going to end up in a sword fight. Well, Top Dollar has a sword. Eric has a weather vane. But
yep, let me ask you. Let me stop here because I wrote this down. He pulls that weather vane out of the concrete. That seems like it would take superhuman strength. Does he still have a little of the crow ability?
I mean, maybe. I thought he just snapped it off the chimney. I didn't realize he actually pulled it out of the concrete.
Yeah, I took it that she just snapped it out.
He snapped it off. Okay, good enough.
Just, the shingles are falling off when she's going down too. I just took it as it's a rough roof.
Okay.
Yeah, you kind of think like things are starting to fall apart. It's probably all rusty, and he was able to just snap it off.
Okay.
So Sarah's falling through the decaying roof. She's calling for help. Her feet are dangling. She can't fall. She's going to die. And this distracts Eric eventually, and Top Dollar runs him through. At this point, Top Dollar reveals that nothing happens in the city without his say-so. So technically what happened to Eric and Shelley was his doing. Again, you were just home on the wrong night, my friend.
Yep.
Eric grabs Top Dollar and pushes the 30 hours of pain that Shelley spent trying to survive into his head all at once. Top Dollar, discombobulated, stumbles and falls off the roof and is impaled on a gargoyle water spout. And this is a bit of a gory shot, considering it hasn't been an overly gory movie, but it's very effective.
And I love the water rushing out of the gargoyle's mouth and it turns blood red.
Yeah.
It's a great scene.
Yeah, it's really good.
And I also love that before this scene, Top Dollar says to Eric, "But you did put a smile on my face, kid."
Yeah.
Just bad guy till the end. He's always such a great character actor.
Yes.
Regarding the 30 hours, just again, because this is what I'm here for, is it's funny because the comic, they weren't even actually what happened like that.
No.
In the comic, Eric and Shelley broke down the side of the road. The gang drove by them in a car, saw them on the side of the road, completely smashed out of their heads. Get out of the car, rape her, kill him, kill her, and Eric was actually the one who held on for 30 hours before he died. And the funny thing is, reading a note that I did look up a little while ago, is the 30 hours of intensive care with most of the events in the comic would be a revenge fantasy as he lies in the coma for that 30 hours. But none of it actually happened. It was all in his head.
Oh.
So I thought that was a really interesting thing. It didn't come from Shelley. It really should have come from him, but hey, he took some liberties with the movie.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some things that they changed and rewrote. And, initially, I guess they had written a screenplay that was so far off of what the comic was that I guess J.O. Barr was like, this isn't even the story anymore. Like, it was just completely out there. And they brought in the second guy to do the rewrite, and that's when they got it to what it is now. So, you know, they could have probably written this movie. It was David Shaw that wrote the ones that were not so great, and then John Shirley came in and kind of brought it back to what it is now.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many images from the set of literally Brandon Lee has the book under his arm, walking around the set. Like he basically used it as his Bible to use the quotes, to get the actions right, to get the scenes right, his positioning, his walking, whatever. It's just, I love the fact that he tried to honor it as much as he could.
Yes, and he did.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a lot about it, but I was very, I was impressed with Brandon Lee's performance in this movie. I thought I can't say it enough. I just thought he brought a lot of heart to the character.
Yeah, I agree. So we're closing in on our final scenes here. Eric grabs Sarah before she can fall, and they help one another back down the bell tower to find Albrecht still alive. And I think this is the next Die Hard callback you were going to call on, is when Albrecht takes a drag of his smoke and then spits it out because he's like, nope, I'm good.
Yeah.
So Eric disappears and the police arrive. This is becoming a bit of a habit with him too, disappearing before the police get there. But, you know, that's how he rolls. Eric lays on Shelley's grave. You know, at this point, his makeup's completely washed away. He's clean-faced, essentially. And she appears to him. And she comes and, you know, the bright light behind her touches his face to bring him back to the realm of the dead with her. And the next scene, when you see their graves, Eric's grave is completely flat. Like, it doesn't even look like it had been opened at all. The Crow returns the ring to Sarah, and Albrecht is carted away in an ambulance after telling the detective that his vigilante's on the roof. So he's telling him that Top Dollar was the vigilante, which would mean that there'd be no more investigation into this.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Tony, so the end of this movie, like she said, you know, the grave shows no sign of the earth being broken or anything. Is there another ending that we can read into, like maybe, I don't know, maybe the Crow made Top Dollar go insane and he killed everybody?
I would never have thought of that, but I guess. I would like to think no. I'd like to think that everything happened in the movie was supernatural, so why not smooth over a grave? I'm going to stick to that. I'll just say when the music swells and Shelley touches his head and he looks up, I might have been weepy a little bit. I might have been a little weepy. It might have been misty in there. I might have had some sniffles.
So
I'm man enough to admit that.
On my first watch, I rolled my eyes and went, oh, give me a break. This movie was so soft. And then on the second watch, when I was looking at Eric and the Crow completely differently, I might have cried too.
Oh my God. I've watched it a 1,000 times, and I did my rewatch for the review and completely burst into sobs at the end, as I did when James O'Barr was sitting, you know, 3 rows behind me the first time I saw it. So yeah. That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, the ending was great. I mean, it was a little mushy, but I'm a sucker for a rom-com, and I liked it a lot. So here's where we give our rewatch scores. And you know what, you guys, since I like to doctor the scores for movies that I love, I am going to go first, and I will let our guest give his rewatch score last. Okay? So the first time I watched this, I was going to give this 1.5 rewatches. It was something I never wanted to see again. After I watched it a second time, I'm going to give it 3.5 rewatches. And I'm going to do that. Not that I would watch it 3.5 more times, because I probably won't. I probably won't watch this movie again. But I can respect it for what it is. I thought Brandon Lee was great. I thought he had a lot of heart. I thought the movie was very cool. And I wouldn't disrespect it by giving it any less than 3.5. And if the cinematography had been a little better, I might have been able to pump it up a little higher than that. But that's going to be my rewatch scores, 3.5.
rewatches.
All right. I will go next then. I'm going to give it a 4.5, and I'm only taking off a 0.5 because some of the cinematography is a little sketchy, especially it looks very much like a 90s music video in some places. And so to a certain degree, it hasn't aged particularly well. But I will watch it many more times. I know I will. But I'm going to say for, going as my recommendation to other people, I'm going to give it a 4.5.
And Tony, before you go, I want to say this. The sliding scale has no science and no rules, so you do what you have to do, and nobody will judge you.
No, I will be fair. 5. No. Honestly, it's there are only 2 to 3 movies in my lifetime that I would ever say 5 for, and we already talked about one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was a fan of the story, the book, because I was a fan of the movie, because I was a fan of following it, all of that. Take all that out. If we're just talking about this movie, I gotta give it a 4. Because Dylan, you both nailed it. It's like it's a very low budget look. It's a very dark movie, but not so much the atmosphere as much as hiding the defects of it.
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit it. Brandon's last role, amazing. Everybody in it, the way I felt they should. Were some of them cartoony? Yes, because they were cartoonish villains.
Yep.
Ones that had to be serious were dead serious. But on ability, it's not an action-packed movie. It's not an over-the-top drama that's going to grab your heartstrings until maybe like 2 or 3 scenes. It isn't Oscar-worthy. It's a great movie for what it is, which is a snapshot of the mid-'90s era of viewpoints of cinematography and the music of the time. This movie was so fueled by the soundtrack. I know we touched, but I feel that you could literally listen to the soundtrack and follow the movie in your head because the songs are so iconic to those scenes and to the feel of the movie. So I have to say it's just a 4.
Okay.
Because, my heart wants to give it more because I love the movie. I love everything about it, but things that it does do wrong. So I'll say 4.
All right. So with my 3.5 rewatches and Dylan's 4.5 rewatches and Tony's 4 rewatches, on the Desert sliding scale of rewatches, we are going to give this one 3.9 rewatches. What are you waiting for? Go see this movie. It's a great movie. Tony, thanks for joining us. And Dylan, of course, it was awesome doing the podcast with you like always.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And as always, I'd like to thank my co-host Dylan and this week's special co-host Tony. And most importantly, I'd like to thank you, the listeners, for supporting the podcast. If you'd like to support the podcast further, you can do that on the Anchor page. It helps us to turn out better content. We hope you join us again next week, where Pat, the podcaster with an opinion, will be back to discuss True Lies, one of my favorites. It's going to be a fun show, so we hope you stop by and take a listen. Until next week, hey, did you ever see that movie?